Welcome to Unlock 360, the podcast for champions of public education. Here we explore the connection between leadership, teaching, and learning, and reveal the keys to getting better results for all students. Each episode highlights a change maker who's turning vision into action and creating schools where both educators and students thrive. Welcome back to Season 5 of Unlock 360, everyone. I am your host, Wendy York Davoud. Joining us today, we have Dr. Matthew Neighbors, Superintendent of Galveston ISD. As the Superintendent of Galveston ISD, Dr. Neighbors leads approximately 6,300 students across multiple campuses, and he is responsible for district-wide strategic planning, curriculum and instruction oversight, teacher development, advancing initiatives in literacy, mathematics, and college and career readiness. Welcome, Dr. Neighbors.
Hello, Wendy. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for being here. I'm super excited to have another Texan on the show. We have hosted other Texas leaders in education, but it's always fun to have someone that shares the accent and Galveston. Being a former Aggie just like yourself. I spent some time there when I was in college with friends, and actually took a trip with some girlfriends just a couple of years ago in the summer. So. Excited to hear what it's like to lead in Galveston.
It is exciting time. So we are actually recording this during Mardi Gras 2026. So it's exciting right now. There's a lot of energy. I was on campuses earlier this morning, and all the students are wearing beads, and staff are dressed up in purple and green and gold. So it's a lot of fun. We're preparing to host more than 1 million visitors in the next 2 weeks, and so that's going to be really, really exciting. That's something very unique, to the island. We have, I think, the largest Mardi Gras celebration in Texas. And so that's a really fun time of the year to be on the island. And yeah, we can't wait. It's really fun for our students and staff. We have our fine arts, our band and dance teams actually participate in 9 parades over the next 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So it's really a community-wide event.
Yeah, I guess so. In fact, as you were sharing that, I was remembering an experience of, going during that time when I was, practically a kid. Of course, didn't think so at the time. You're in college, you think you're all of that. But it was a lot of fun. And I was just thinking, I wonder if they're involved in the parades. 9 parades.
Yes. And we're also hosting the TSPRA conference this year. So the Texas School Public Relations Association conference is going to be on the island. And they're going to be here for the Fat Tuesday parade, which is sort of the final parade that ends the Mardi Gras celebrations. And just to host leaders from all over the state during that week is really going to be cool. We've got several of our staff involved in that. So it is. It's just, we're a very small community of only about 50,000 people, but we host over 8 million visitors a year. So we're a lot like maybe some of the resort towns in Colorado, where there's a group of people who actually live here and call this place home. But the community and the businesses and the cruise terminals, the industry here is much larger than what you would expect, because even though we only have 50,000 people who live here, we have almost 300,000 people who work here. Across a variety of different industries. And so it's a really bustling community, and has a lot of resources and a lot of culture and restaurants and hotels and beaches and museums and things to do for a community of this size. And so we're really blessed, and it's a great place to live and work.
Yes, I can imagine it is. Dr. Neighbors, will you share with our audience a bit about your educational journey that led you to that seat as a superintendent in Galveston?
Sure. So my wife, after we graduated from A&M, my wife got into nursing school at Texas Tech. And so we moved out to Lubbock, Texas. And I spent the first 7 years of my career teaching in Lubbock ISD and in Brownfield ISD, just outside of Lubbock. And then we moved to Galveston, and we've been here ever since. And so I joined GISD in 2004 as a high school teacher, and just over the years became an assistant principal, instructional coach, kind of worked my way up through the system. And I've now been the superintendent for 3 years. But I think one of the things that probably makes me unique among my peers in the superintendent world is that I spent 17 years in the classroom as a classroom teacher.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Before people say I went to the dark side, I went to administration. But yeah, so I really do. And I happily admit that I see things through rose-colored lenses. And I almost always see issues first and foremost through a teacher's lens. And then, I have to branch out, of course, as a superintendent and see things financially and, from the business perspective as well. But I try to always start with what's happening inside those 4 walls of each and every classroom in our district is the most powerful and most important thing that happens daily. And so I think that I'm very grateful for that time that I spend in the classroom, and feel like it really does inform my leadership.
Yeah. Okay. That is unique. And I am now curious about why, like what encouraged you or inspired you or who, what led you to the dark side?
Sure. So it was the end of one of the summers, and the principal came to me, and he had just lost an assistant principal, and I was teaching social studies, and he's like, I cannot find another assistant principal this late in the game. Like, it's just not going to happen. And he's like, but I think I can find another social studies teacher. He's like, would you just do it for 1 year? And if you don't like it, we'll send you back to the classroom. But he's like, I'm in a pinch, and I just really need someone's help. And I had already been helping with summer school, so I'd been doing some administrative things. I had my master's, and he knew I was ready to go. And the other assistant principals interviewed me and asked me to sort of join their team. And so that was it. I mean, after doing it for 1 year, then I got to kind of move up in my role within the administrative team, and just realize that it was a potential to have such a larger impact than what I ever imagined. And certainly at that time, never thought that I would be the superintendent. But thought that maybe one day a principal. I guess that was maybe my vision, that I would maybe get to lead a campus one day, and try to emphasize the importance of relationships with teachers and students. And so, yeah, that was the impetus.
Okay. Yeah. And so now you've been in the seat since the 23-24 school year.
Yes, yes, summer of 2023.
What has it been like?
Well, it's been a lot, but it's been so great. I mean, the chance to advocate for and to work on behalf of all those educators who I worked alongside for so long is really, really rewarding. And so just to walk the hallways and to know that every day I'm working for them, and just not that long ago, I was teaching in a classroom right beside them or down the hall from them, or I was in a PLC with them. That's just really special. And so I know not everyone gets a chance to sort of be promoted within their own organization, but for me, it's been super, super special. And I'm grateful every day for the opportunity to be where I am, and to fight for our students and teachers.
Yeah, that's really awesome. There is always something. Well, I don't know. So in some cases they say it's easier to, move into a new position, a position of leadership, in a district where you already did work. And sometimes they say it's, easier to do that in a place you didn't. But just hearing you speak to the value of that and why that's been helpful and inspiring for you, I like that. Thanks for sharing.
It's really cool to go to a PTO meeting and have a parent come up who maybe I taught when they were in high school, and now their kids are attending the elementary campus. And it's just a really cool full circle moment.
I bet. Okay. And in being in such a small community, I'm sure that it's hard to not run into everyone everywhere you go.
Yes, people say, what are the advantages and disadvantages? There are advantages to kind of coming in fresh with a fresh lens, and sort of evaluating a district, and sort of setting the tone from your leadership perspective. I do think that coming from the inside, I knew what some of the pain points were. I knew who was influential in the community, and who we needed to network with in order to help us grow and improve. And so I just think it made our growth maybe faster. We were able to sort of, instead of spending that 6 to 12 months of learning and listening and trying to figure out the values of the community, I sort of had that already in hand. Still met with tons of community groups, introduced myself as the superintendent, and did a lot of the traditional things that a new superintendent would do. But I feel like we were able to maybe move a little bit more quickly in the beginning than maybe what I would have if I'd been coming in from the outside.
That's awesome. And it also makes me think about, and just, kind of looking into the district and what you all are working towards. I came across your strategic plan. And one of the things that I found interesting was just the timeline of the plan. In that, frequently I will, either in my work and working with school districts, or in the podcast and interviewing district leaders, be, talking about a strategic plan that may span 5 years. But it looks like your plan is for 3 years.
So when I became superintendent, we had a 5-year plan, and it had been created with very little input from across the district.
Okay.
So when I came on board, I immediately coalesced about 100 different people from across the district, from teachers to mid-level administrators, campus principals, and said, look, here are the top 5 priorities. Let's put together a strategic plan that we're actually going to use, and that we're actually going to implement. And so with everyone's input, we came up with kind of our top 5. We sort of categorized our main strategic priorities into 5 main categories. And I feel like that it was much more authentic. The language was very more purposeful. It was an active document. It was something we were actually going to do and use. And so every month when we have our principal and directors meeting, we do kind of a 4 corners activity where whoever's sort of leading those different action plans, because our 5 goals break down into like 4 or 5 strategies, for each goal. And so we actually divide up and people meet and they talk about where are we on this goal, what still needs to happen, what barriers need to be removed, what are, how are we progressing on this? Have we already achieved it? Do we need to add to this? And so I think that they all realized not only was there a lot more input into its development, but now that we are executing it, there's a lot more, involvement from my leadership team. And the reason we did 3 years is you're required by law to have a 5-year strategic plan in the state of Texas. And so the plan that we had submitted officially covered that 5-year period. And so I said, well, let's restart this. Let's redo it for these 3 years. And then at that point, we will create a new official 5-year plan and probably keep 5-year plans going forward. But we did 3 years because I just wasn't satisfied with the plan that we had in place.
Okay, yeah, and I just think that what you spoke to around, you're bringing it back frequently, and people are talking about it. It's sitting right here on one page. It's easy to to like own and understand. Clear actions, all of that is impressive. And you mentioned execution. That is one of the biggest challenges of any of these larger plans or visions that a district may have, is really executing and ensuring that it is actually impacting the classroom. So tell us a little bit about the vision and where you are with your strategic plan implementation.
Yeah, sure. So the first part of that, I really do feel like that our vision is unique to Galveston. Our mission is unique to Galveston. We use the term raise the grade. And that term, of course, people in education think they know what it means. And it does have a little bit of a double meaning. So, of course, we do want to raise our accountability and raise the grade, right, of our campuses in our district. But in Galveston, when we talk about the meaning of this mission, it harkens back to the 1900 hurricane, the deadliest disaster in Texas history, killed almost 6,000 people and destroyed about 2/3 of the city. And so at that time, Galveston was no more than 8 feet above sea level. It's like this sandbar off the coast of the state of Texas. And the residents really had to make a concerted decision. Were they going to pick up and leave because this was obviously not a safe place to live, or were they going to try to find a way to make it work? And so to their credit, they said, we are going to find a way to make this a livable place and a productive place. And so they engineered what was called the seawall. And originally it was only supposed to be 1 mile in length. And so the seawall, when they poured these huge concrete curved barriers that stood 17 feet above the beach. So they plopped them down on the beach, and it had this nice curve that you can still see today. But at the top where people drive today on the seawall, that's 17 feet above the ocean level.
Uh-huh.
And so in order to build the city of Galveston behind the seawall, they had to dredge and bring in mud and slush, and they had to build up the level of the ground, which in engineering terms is raising the grade. It's raising the ground level. And they raised 17 feet behind the seawall. So they lifted up homes, they lifted up churches, they lifted everything up that had survived, and then brought in all this new dirt and land. And about 8 or 9 years later, it worked so well, it protected the homes that were behind the seawall, that they extended the seawall. And today the seawall is 10 miles long. And you've got this entire city of Galveston that has thrived and has flourished behind what was this huge engineering feat of raising the grade.
Yeah.
And so what we talk about in Galveston when we say raise the grade is that's the power of education. There's data that shows that education actually extends your lifespan. People who have more education live longer than people who do not. And we talk about the statistics about if somebody goes to college, the percentages of their children and grandchildren who go to college versus someone who never attends college, how hard it is for their generations behind them and their legacy to attend college. So literally, education has the power to transform lives. And it does so through the generations and for legacies and generations to come. So when we say raise the grade, we are talking about the power of education to lift up an entire community over time. And that's really our core mission. And so I think it's unique to the island. It resonates with people. And that's one of the reasons that I love it. And I think that no matter who you are, whether you are leading a private industry or a public entity, the mission itself has to be something that resonates with your employees and with your parents, with your stakeholders. But it also has to be something that you, as the leader, believe in. Because if I'm going to be standing in front of community groups and in front of parents and in front of staff, I want to be able to say that I'm 100% sold to this mission, as well as it being relevant to the community. So I think when the leadership and the community, that mission aligns, that's when you've got some momentum. And so I'm happy to say, of course, That's why I think every leader has to be involved in your mission and vision development. Yes, there were 100 people who were involved, but in the end, I put my stamp of approval on it and say, yes, that's something I can support. I can walk into every meeting and say, we want to raise the grade.
Yeah, I love that. So it's beautiful, and yeah, I just think the tie to the history and the way that you're honoring that in the community, and also the multiple meanings is it's great. I love that.
I told you this was going to be a great start to season 5.
It's yes, yeah, and you are right. It's awesome. I appreciate this so much. Will you please share with us a bit about how raising the grade is actually like how you see it coming to fruition, how it's working? I did see that there were some gains in the state accountability ratings that the district experienced that were pretty impressive this past year.
Our student growth scores this last year were the strongest we've experienced since the implementation of STAR. Back in, I think, 2017 or so. So for the last 8 or 9 years, they were the strongest growth scores that we've seen. And part of that was inside of our mission, we have kind of our core. A lot of people have what are called their core values. Our core values are 6 things that we want to see lived out inside of every classroom. And so we call them our classroom essentials. And in those are bell to bell. We want to maximize instruction. We want to listen to students. We feel like that's a unique one, that we want their voice to be heard in the classroom, and that their input to be part of their education. Of course, we want a positive structure and support. That's kind of our discipline management. High expectations, obviously. We also say it takes a village, or here we say it takes an island, right, to raise a young person. And so that sort of references this network of nonprofits and community support that we have. 80% of our students are qualify for free and reduced lunch, but we have a ton of support on the island. Again, like I said, we're a town of only 50,000 people, but we have Galveston College, which is a community college. We have Texas A&M Galveston, which prepares students for the marine industries. And then we have UTMB, which is maybe the largest medical, not only hospital, but medical education institution. And they prepare you for almost any of the medical professions, all the way from nursing and phlebotomy to medical doctors and surgeons. And so we have 3 institutions of higher learning here on the island. And that is just amazing. And so it just shows you the value that education has on the island. In addition to those 3 institutions, Ball High School, which is our high school, we are the oldest public high school in the state of Texas. We were the very first one ever established. So there's just all this history and all this legacy and this importance of education that's recognized by our community and by the forefathers who started those institutions. So when we say it takes an island, we truly mean that there are a lot of groups working together to lift these students and give them the best opportunities possible. And then our 6th core value it's called 1+. And it means that our goal is for every student to grow 1+ in a classroom. And so the example I like to use is if a student comes into a 5th grade classroom and they're only reading on 3rd grade level, moral mission means that we are supposed to try to get that kid to at least a 4th grade reading level. Yes, I would love for you to get them to 5th grade, but your goal is to grow them 1+. So if they come in on a 3rd grade reading level as a teacher, you are compelled to make sure that they leave you with at least a 4th grade reading level. Grow them a year while they're under your care. But it also means that if a kid comes in on a 7th grade reading level, you need to grow them to an 8th grade reading level. Don't be content that they're above grade level, so you just let them stay where they are.
Right.
Our mission is to grow every kid 1+, no matter where we meet them at. Grow them, grow them, grow them. And so that's been an emphasis inside the classroom, and I think that was evidenced by our data from last year.
Yes, and I could not agree more. Every child deserves a year of growth for a year of input. At a minimum, they're in our care. They should leave at least having gained that year of growth. So I think that's awesome. I'm reminded of an experience I had working with a high school English team in Southern California. And, I posed the question, what does it look like for a year, for a student to gain a year's worth of growth? What does that actually mean in terms of their skills and, their behaviors, their ability? Like, what is that going to look like? And it was just mind blowing for the team to have to try to define that and then say, okay, how are we going to measure it? And then say, okay, where are they now? And literally list the kiddos by name. And then, let's capture where they are now. And then that means the goal is, and then how are we going to measure in the interim? And that was, I remember the team, they were a bit overwhelmed and frustrated by the whole process of kind of getting that down, but then they were so grateful. For the very first time as a team, they felt they really knew where every kid was and where they all needed to get to in order to have that, year's, worth of growth. So, thanks for reminding me of that experience. That was a
Oh,
great.
I love that memory. I think anybody who's in the education space, it really does resonate, right? The challenge, but also the necessary goal of trying to grow every child. And like you said, kids come in on different levels, and so it's not easy. We talk about differentiation all the time. It's not an easy thing to do. It's one of the most difficult things to do as a teacher,
It really
but
is.
it's very rewarding when it happens.
It really is, and I remember just feeling. I can also remember my own feeling of defeat when you look at kids maybe who weren't growing or gaining that year, and, you might feel really excited about how some of your kids are doing great, but if they're not all growing, missing the mark, Wendy. So, and I think about all the things that I've learned since then, and, I'm curious, like, how you all go about how do you measure your progress and monitor to see where kids are?
Sure. So we have multiple measures. We are a teacher incentive allotment district. So the
Okay,
teachers that are able to evidence the highest growth get rewarded with additional incentive pay. And we
nice.
actually have that available for every teacher, every grade level, every subject. A lot
Okay,
of districts only do the core, or they maybe do math and English because those are easier to measure through standardized assessments. But we actually use what are called student growth measures. So they are teacher designed assessments that have to be, of course, validated. And then we've been doing it for several years now. So, some of those assessments are pretty standard. But I mean, we have assessments for Spanish. We have assessments for career and technical education classes. We have assessments for elementary classes. And so we're kind of unique in that way. They do a pre-test and post-test. And then, of course, it's also half of the measure is the student growth, and then half the measure is the teacher's T-test evaluation, their professional evaluation. But we also do use NWEA map to measure student growth. And then, of course, we have the state assessments that we use, and we're able to look and see if students are growing year to year and making sure that they're not declining, but trying to grow their performance. So we use multiple measures to measure that growth, but our campuses have what are called data walls. And again, I know that's not unique to different campuses and different districts, and we are monitoring that student growth by individual student and by grade level at every campus.
that's awesome. Okay, and so, you have several campuses. How are your well, tell me okay, let me back up here. I'm really curious about your style and the trust that you build with principals and your leadership style. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
So I share a story with my team. We're going to go over your time limit here,
No,
telling
we're
all
good.
these organizations. When and I hopefully I don't get choked up because this is really really personal, really powerful. When I was a young teacher, so we moved into our first rent house. We had our first child. We needed a bigger place. We were living in an apartment, so we moved into our first rent house, and we were outside of Lubbock. And there was a rancher who had built a home in town for he and his wife chose every decoration, built the house to her specifications, and then she passed away right before they were able to move in. So he still lived outside of town on his ranch, and the house had sat empty for a few years. And so there were some people in the school who knew we were looking for a home and kind of reached out to him and were like, "Hey, are you just going to keep letting that house sit there, or are you possibly interested in renting it?" So he had never rented it out to anyone before, and he met me in the driveway and walked me around his home, and you know you could tell he was pretty emotional about it, but he sort of explained everything. And then we met back out near his pickup in the front yard, and he told me what the rent would be and said that it would be due on the first day of every month. And he said, "Do we have a deal?" And he stuck out his hand to shake my hand, and we literally shook hands in the driveway, and that was it. And if you know anything about renting an apartment or renting a house now, you know that there
Yeah.
are lawyers involved, multiple pages you have to sign. You've got to have collateral. You do a credit check.
Yep.
None of that. It was just, if we're going to have this, if I'm going to trust you with the house that I built for my wife, I need to be able to look you in the eye and shake your hand and do we have a deal? And we lived in that house for about 5 years, and he was one of the best landlords we could have ever had. And we took care of that house like it was our own. I fixed everything that I could myself. And we were so much more responsible for that home because of the trust that he showed to us. And so we took better care of it than I think we would have ever a traditional rent home. And so I tell my leadership team, that's the way I lead. I'm going to extend a handshake and I'm going to trust you until you give me a reason not to. The rent's due at the first of the month. And as long as you continue to meet that standard and continue to take care of what you've been entrusted with, then we're never going to have a problem. But when I have to start coming to you and you're not meeting your end of the deal, or, I'm not meeting my end of the deal, then that's when we need to have a discussion when you don't feel like I'm meeting my end of the deal. And so I think that really, I think my team really responds to that because they know they're not going to get micromanaged. And again, they're going to be trusted to do their jobs. And that's the grace that I was shown and how I was treated as a young man growing up. And I just know how empowering that made me feel. And so I try to extend that same level of respect and trust to anyone who works in my team and on my leadership team.
That's fantastic. And I am reminded of the research around developing and accelerating a coherent culture of continuous improvement that's grounded in like collaboration. And one of my like famous go-tos is it's not trust and verify. It needs to be trust and interact. And so much about what you described is trust and interact in terms of even developing a strategic plan and then how you go about engaging stakeholders in the work. So appreciate and respect that. And I think it goes such a long way. If you can take just I'll extend the trust, but I'm going to verify. That's not really fully extending the trust, is it?
Yeah, and I think as a leader, I guess there's some people who are afraid they're going to get burned by that, and maybe afraid that somebody will take your humility and meekness as a weakness. But I think that over time you earn more respect and you earn trust in response to extending trust. And so I would rather be burned a few times in my career for trusting someone that maybe I shouldn't have, or trusting them too early in the process. I'd rather make that mistake and have that be one or two people and have the other 98, enjoy and really thriving and flourishing under my leadership. So I at least hope that that's the way it works out.
That's good. Dr. Neighbors, I'm thinking about back to what I was going to ask before I got onto the question about your trusted, your style when it comes to trusting in leadership was in terms of the campuses, with multiple campuses implementing these action steps and really seeing your strategic plan executed in the classroom. How do you all maximize consistency and collective efficacy across school sites?
We're a fairly small district. In the state of Texas, we're considered a mid-sized district.
Right.
With, 6,000 students. There's districts that have 30 and 40,000 students because we're Texas. We like to do things big. There's also, I think, out of the 2,000 districts in Texas, almost 1,000 of them are small rural districts. So there's a lot that are even smaller than us. I don't think that 10 campuses is, a too large of an amount. We have one person who's kind of over the elementary campuses and one person who does secondary. I personally bring in the elementary principals for lunch about once every 6 to 8 weeks. And so just allow them a chance to see me face to face and have a small group setting that's just about their issues. Once a month, we have principal and directors meetings where we kind of bring in all the leadership, and that's about 30 or 40 people. But then, the elementary principals, that's 5, and then the secondary principals, that's another 5. And so just having that small group meeting with them, that's really been helpful, just for them to sort of be able to air out their grievances, but then also to realize, oh, you're having that same issue. And then, okay, I hear 2 or 3 people parroting the same thing. I know that it's something that maybe we need to address at the systems level. Whereas if a principal says something is wrong and somebody else is like, oh, we don't have that problem. Oh, this is what we do. They're able to kind of problem solve among themselves a lot of times. And it's opened up the communication among them so that they feel more comfortable sharing with one another. And I'm sure there's a lot more offline interaction between one another, not in my presence. And that's what I want to facilitate.
Yeah.
And get them comfortable interacting with one another and realizing that there's a lot of expertise in the room that they can share among themselves. And so so that's one way that we sort of maintain that consistency. We do walkthroughs. We have a district math lead, and a district ELA lead, a district science, district social studies, and they will do walkthroughs with campus principals just to make sure that the instruction is, we're monitoring high quality materials, making sure that everyone's using the right curriculum, and we're monitoring quality of instruction. And then, of course, we get the assessment data. And so really those are kind of your 3 pillars, right? Curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And so we are there to help. We're there to assist. And, we kind of use our district level people we almost never go in on our own. We go in with a campus instructional coach or with a principal to make sure that we're always seeing the same thing. Or, sometimes when you come in from the district level, you don't have all the context. And sometimes you need some context from campus level people before you give any feedback. And we try to funnel all that feedback through one person so that if I'm a new teacher, I'm not hearing from 5 different people. what I should be doing in my classroom, I hear from one voice, and that one person can take all the expertise and sort of funnel it and decide what that person can handle at the moment.
Yeah, okay, that's good, and I'm thinking of, just an experience recently with, one of the small rural districts in Texas that was implementing, classroom walkthroughs and really looking at how to close the feedback loop. So, you visit a classroom and you give the feedback to a teacher, and then how do you like, the next step was how are we going back to see whether or not that feedback is being implemented effectively and having an impact, and um, really powerful work. And just in the calibration piece that you mentioned.
Yeah. So like I said, at the district level, we're probably in, like, let's just say, let's make up a pretend scenario. As a district
Okay.
level math coach, I might be in every math teacher's classroom once a week, but the campus instructional coach is probably in that classroom maybe every day, at least briefly. And so, like I said, when we come through and maybe we see something that needs to be addressed, that feedback is either given to the campus principal or to the campus instructional coach. And then that person is the one who's giving the feedback to the teacher, because maybe it's something that they've already talked to them about. Like, yes, I've
Right.
already seen that. I've already talked about it. They don't need to hear it again. Or maybe it's something new, like, okay, that's great, but I've got them working on something else. I'm going to give them that feedback next week because that's something they need to work on after they master what I've got them working on,
Yeah.
currently. And so we really allow that accountability and sort of the follow through on the feedback to come from the campus level instructional coach and principal. As the district, we want to be a resource, but we don't want to get in the way. And
Or
you come
overload.
in and say, I need you working on,
Yeah.
um, I need you working on your whole group instruction. And then somebody else walks in and says, oh, I need them working on small group instruction. And they're like, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
We don't want that confusion at the teacher level.
That would be, as a teacher, it would be really hard if you were getting feedback of, ways to get better, and you're getting, maybe it's all good, it's all valid, but you're
Right.
getting multiple things to do. And we know, it can be challenging to make a change in adult behavior. And even as, well-intentioned as we are, it's not always easy to change how we get our habits and routines. And so, one thing at a time. I was thinking of that plus one kind of concept that you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah, and we've all been through some training that talks about how bite-sized feedback is really the best. And if you try to give too much at once, if I'm giving too much feedback at once, I'm going to pick out the one thing that I feel like is most important to me, and that's the thing I'm going to address. And
Right.
so if you give me 5 pieces of feedback, I'm going to hear you, but I'm only going to probably respond to the one that I feel like, oh, okay, that one, that's legitimate. I will try to work on that one thing. I'm not going to really probably try to work on all 5 things at once. So we just have to realize, seek to seek to understand before you seek to be understood. And so, understand what that person is experiencing as the person receiving this feedback, and how would you want it to be delivered, and then how would you want it to be monitored, and how would you want it to be supported, and then try to do that for the other person.
I just had this vision, or like, I don't know, I just imagined in a scenario where a teacher gets feedback to implement small group instruction and also has feedback to practice transitions, and having kids like some classroom management type feedback. And you'd probably want them to work on the first one before, or the second piece of feedback before they try to do the small groups, so they had that down. But yeah, that was a really good explanation.
Some of the uncommon schools or the relay training, um, they talk about, they actually have what's called a waterfall document, but it sort of has what you were just describing. It has sort of classroom management feedback that you might give, and then it has instructional feedback that you might give, and it just sort of helps you to prioritize. So if I have there might be a classroom management issue, like you might see an instructional issue, but this classroom management issue is so bad it's preventing everybody from learning, so I need to address that first. And so it's nice that someone's sort of done that thought process. And so our instructional coaches actually use that document, and
Oh,
when they're
good.
deciding what feedback to give, they sort of look on that list quickly and see which one might need to be prioritized.
That's good. That's great. Yes, and I am familiar with that. It is really nice that someone has thought that through. Anything that we don't have to reinvent, that we know it works and will help us get results, let's do that. So, good. Dr. Neighbors, so many wonderful things happening, and you're seeing gains in student achievement, building that collaborative culture across campuses, developing that collective efficacy and expertise. What are some of the challenges that you all are facing as a district?
Sure. So like I said, we have about 80% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. And we have a very unique community where we have people who own businesses, who are executives in the cruise industry, and who are really uber wealthy. And then we have a lot of families who work in the service industry, right? They work in the tourism industry. So you have families who maybe doubling up or living in really low rent apartments. Um, and we don't have a huge middle class, which a lot of suburban communities
Okay.
cater to. So we've got super wealthy and super
Uh-huh.
super poor families that we serve. And so that's just one sort of unique challenge. But like I said, I really believe we are unique in the communities in Texas in that we have such a strong network of nonprofits and community groups that sort of step in to that gap. So, for example, we have what's called the Permanent Endowment Fund. It's a branch of the Moody Foundation, and they are currently, since COVID, they've been helping us with math and reading interventionists at the elementary level. And so these are people who pull out and do the small group tutoring, the 3 to 4 students at a time. And again, the results have just been phenomenal. You find retired teachers or master teachers who love being around students but don't want to have to write lesson plans anymore, don't want to have to attend faculty meetings. They're like, just let me do pullouts and let me help kids learn how to read, or let me teach kids how to do math. And they've sort of helped with the funding for that initiative. And that has been transformative, and it's helped us pour our own resources into paying our teachers better and not having to add these additional staff. And then they also have helped. We are renovating our fine arts facilities, and they made a huge donation to the auditorium to renovate it with one of the great architect firms in Houston that's just done the Alley Theater in Jones Hall. And so they're going to come down and renovate our historic auditorium. So when you
Awesome.
have community partners like that, it's just really, really powerful, and it
Yeah,
helps the whole community to really be connected and bought into the success of all the students.
that is invaluable. Good stuff. Dr. Neighbors, it's been so awesome having you on the show. Where could someone go if they want to learn more about Galveston ISD and they're looking to possibly relocate their kiddos or maybe re-enroll their kiddos in public schools in Galveston? Maybe they're looking for a job as a teacher or, as an
That's
administrator.
right. Come earn that incentive allotment money. But this is a great place to do it. I know it. I truly tell people all the time, it really is. I mean, you can be a teacher anywhere in America. You're a teacher. You can move anywhere in the United States and teach school. But Galveston is really a cool place to be a teacher. You can go surfing in the afternoons after class lets out, or you can go sailing. You can enjoy the walk along the beach with your dogs. We do have a lot of teachers who move here when they near retirement because this is where they want to invest, in their later years. And then young teachers, again, I talked to you about all the universities that we have. We have almost 10,000 of our 50,000 residents that are between the ages of 16 and 24. So that young adult group is really strong on the island. And so it's just, again, the restaurants, the museums, the culture, the festivals. We have sandcastle building competitions. We have Mardi Gras. We have Dickens on the Strand. July 4th fireworks shows with 100,000 people on the beach. It's a really, really cool place to raise a family and to invest and to live. And so I tell people, there are other great districts to work for. I'm not, naive to that fact. But if you're going to spend your entire life as an educator and you're going to raise the grade in someone's life, and you want to be in a place where you really are going to impact families who need education to transform their lives, and you want to do so in a place that's a really cool place to live and raise a family, then you can't do much better in Texas than Galveston.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. And then I'm also, it's kind of something fun. So let's say that, someone is taking a trip just to visit or, a fun vacation or maybe to check it out to consider relocating. What are Dr. Matthew Neighbors' favorite go-to places?
Yeah, there's always the places the tourists go, and then there's always the places that the locals
Yeah.
know about, right? So yeah, there's so many. I mean, when I was a teacher, there was a friend of mine across the hall, and so every Friday night, whether it was before a basketball game or a football game, we would go out to eat. And so one Friday it was my treat, and then the next Friday it was his treat, and then it was my treat. But the challenge was we could never repeat. We could never go to the
Oh
same.
boy. Okay.
And so we went for 3 years before he moved away. We went for 3 years every
Oh my,
Friday night, eating at a different place, trying out all the different restaurants in town before we would go to
wow.
the games. And it was so much fun. It was such a challenge, and we were trying to find these dives or find these little places that maybe had just opened. That's really the best thing about Galveston is that you've got so much to explore, so much variety. Of course, great seafood, but also some just really great local restaurants, not just chain restaurants. You got a lot of really cool local places. And so if I was to name one and not the others, I would be remiss.
Okay. It's so funny. I actually lived in Houston for a little over 4 years, and I mean, I that's one of the things that was just really great is because you could access, Galveston, you're not too far from, other places. Plus, there's just so much good food in that whole area, like anything you could want, and it's pretty good stuff. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on our show. One last piece. This season, to conclude our episodes, I'm asking our guests to just, give a shout out or honor someone in your life, someone in your career who has inspired you and influenced you as a leader. I know that there is a special rancher you mentioned. Is there someone else you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I think so. This is interesting because I just saw him yesterday, but there was a former school board member. I was a principal at the time, and I was at the middle school level, and was loving it and was doing great. And we had a previous superintendent who was retiring, so I was at the retirement party, and we were just kind of mixing and mingling. And this school board member sort of came up to me shoulder to shoulder, and just kind of leaned over and said, "You're going to be superintendent one day." And it was the first person who ever spoke that out loud in my life, and
Wow.
I had never really imagined it or thought about it. And so it was the first person who kind of planted that seed. But to think that somebody else saw it in me, and somebody who was in a position who interacted with the superintendent all the time. And so I think that person, I've mentioned this to them before, so they know. But I think that if you have the opportunity, if you see that potential in someone, whether it's you see potential in someone being an assistant principal or a principal or a district leader of any kind, I always like to say, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due. And so if you have a positive thought or a positive encouragement for somebody, don't hold it back. Don't just let it be a thought. Speak it out. Send them a note. Shoot them an email. Send them a text. Don't keep that to yourself, because you never know what power that's going to impact in somebody else's life.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And thank you, Dr. Neighbors. Indeed, it has been such an engaging conversation and so many wonderful things happening. And I appreciate you also sharing, the real challenges that you're experiencing. Thank you for being on our show today.
It's been great. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you for joining us on Unlock 360. If this conversation sparked new thinking, share it with a colleague and keep the dialogue going in your school district. Public education is complex work, and progress happens when leadership and teaching move together. I'm Wendy York Davoud. Until next time, keep building the systems that unlock what's possible, because strong leadership drives deeper learning.